pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you Commander Bruce Apgar. I'll tell you a little bit about Commander Apgar's career. It is incredibly impressive, and I personally want to thank him for taking time to come and talk to the Corps Cadets here at Carson Academy. Commander Apgar attended the US Army War College and received a Master's in Strategic Studies in 2010. He retired after 30 years of naval service in 2013 after a 3-year assignment to the faculty of the US Army War College. Currently employed as a defence contractor with the US Army Security Assistance Command, he remains active in his church, the Boy Scouts and his community. The title of Commander Apgar's presentation, as you see today, Why Are You Here? But I just want to give you a little insight into some of his command experience as well in the United States Navy. Commander Apgar enlisted in December 1983. He received a degree from State College. He was an auxiliaries officer on the USS Clark, a navigator on the USS Mount Whitney, a combat systems officer on the USS Clark Ring, a squadron operations officer on the Destroyer Squadron 2, a navigator on the USS Bataan, executive officer of the USS Gonzales. He attended the Surface Warfare Officer School at Newport, Rhode Island, and was executive officer of the USS Leyte Gulf. Military awards include the Meritorious Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, Navy Achievement Medal, Army Achievement Medal, and various unit and campaign decorations. Please welcome Commander Bruce Apgar Carson.
Appreciate the invitation to be here today. And what time is dinner? 1800? I've prepared an extensive set of comments for today, so I'll just post them there, so you don't worry too long about me being here a long time. But I am glad to be here today, and I understand that I am the last in this lecture series for the year, which I figured that out last night as I was contemplating my remarks for today. I said, well, that's kind of an important place to be, last. So, what can we do? What can we talk about that? How many seniors are here? Yeah, stand up, all the seniors. All right, good for you. All right, have a seat. That's great. What could go out the door with you if there were some things that I wish someone had said to me on my way out the door when I was a senior in high school? I was headed out to enlist as an electrician in the Navy. Boy, I wish there were some things I knew different. While I talk, I'm going to hand a mystery around. You may think you know what it is, but I'm going to hand a mystery around, and I just want it to make its way around the room. And when it gets back up here to CDR, then I'll know that it's made its way around the room. So please just pass that around. But why are you here? I grasped onto this during one of my executive officer tours when I was dealing with some young sailor who had gotten themselves into some really complicated, difficult situation with a girl, with a beer, with a car, with a loan shark. It just occurred to me, how do we get ourselves into the situations that we're in? What types of things do we do in our lives that get us where we're going? So as I reflected on that, for me, I go to a Presbyterian church, and we have something called the Westminster Confession of Faith, and the very first question in the catechism is, what is the chief end of man? First confession in the whole church doctrine, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him all your days. I'm not here to witness and conduct a sermon, but when you look at that, why am I really here? Why did God put me here on the earth? What's the point of me standing in front of you? What's the point of you guys numbing your behinds on those nice wooden benches there? Every day when you get up and you think about what's laying out before you, think about that. Why am I here? What is the point of this day in my life? How many of you think there is something huge that you are here to accomplish in your future? Most people think that. What if there was something huge that you were supposed to to accomplish this day. Did you ever think about that? There may not be a tomorrow, but what are you going to do when you look at today, when you get up out of bed and you say, where am I going? How am I going to get there? And where am I going to make a difference? That's what this is about. Why are you here? So I threw a few little notes down on my extensive comments here. We're going to go over those. I'll leave this sticky right there so you guys can all write it down later. The first thing is, this may be a surprise to you, but you're going to be a follower in your life much more than you're going to be a leader. Anybody here not believe that? You don't believe that? I will tell you that you will always have a boss. There will always be someone, even if you are President Obama, you have a boss. It's called the taxpayers and the voters. So you will always have someone that you work for, which means that you're always going to have to follow somebody. How are you going to succeed as a follower so that you can be a good leader? Because if you join the military and you're given a platoon of soldiers to lead, are you the king of the hill? No, because there's going to be a company. And that company commander is going to tell you what to do with your platoon. But that company, he's not on his own, he's going to work for a battalion.
Time up, sir.
So there's always going to be somebody there. So being a good follower is just as important or even more important than being a good leader, because when your boss gives you an assignment, you can't turn around to your subordinates and say, well, Mr. Smith wants us to go clean out this closet. I don't know why, but we got to do it. That is poor leadership as a follower. You have been assigned a job, and it's your job, in my perspective, to glorify God while I'm doing it, but also to support your employer, to own the mission that you've been given as if it's your own. So since you're going to spend most of your life, unless you become independently wealthy and buy your own island, as a follower, you've got to find good ways to accept direction, support direction, and own it. That way, if you own it, then the people who are leading are going to own it as well, and they're going to do a better job at it. Why does it matter? If you are a sailor in the bilge, who knows what a bilge is? Yes, sir.
It's the bottom of the ship.
It's the inside of the bottom of the ship. But what do you think is on the inside of the bottom of the ship?
Nothing good.
It's filth. Or it's not. If you have a really good XO on your ship, it's not filthy. But normally there is stuff down there. But there is water and oil and debris that accumulate down in the bilge of a ship. And if you have to send a sailor down there, and you say, hey, I want you to go scrub that bilge. I want you to scrape all that oil up, and I want to be able to eat scrambled eggs off the deck plates when you're done. Okay, that sounds like good direction. But what do you think that means to the guy who's got to go do it? This is gonna suck. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that job really isn't that pleasant. However, if you can explain to that person why your boss assigned it to you, because if there is debris in the bilge, and if there is oil in the bilge, and if there is filth in the bilge, if there is a fire or damage, the fire is going to clog when we suck the rags up into the pumps. The fire is going to be worse when the oil in the bilge catches on fire, and there are countless instances of sailors dying in fires because of the bilge being dirty and the fires not being able to put out. So as a follower who is also a leader, you need to make sure that you can explain your tasks to your subordinates, and when you don't understand the tasks, go to your superior and say, hey, I don't understand the task. I want to support you in the mission. I don't understand it. I'd like to understand it better, but even if I can't understand it, please explain to me why we're doing it so that we can do it as well as possible. So even though you're not in charge of the overall picture, you're still going to be a leader when you're following somebody else. Now there's another piece of that is peer leadership. Say there's 6 or 7 of you all working for the same guy, and they tell you to do something and you all think it's the stupidest thing going. Anybody ever been there? I've been there. Anybody ever griped about it? I have. Admit it. Come on, we all have. We don't like working for people, and especially when the job is stupid. But maybe the job's not stupid and you don't understand the perspective. So how do you then rise above your peers and actually execute some leadership among your peers by supporting your mission, by being positive, doing the best job you can, and owning the outcome, saying, hey, we need to do this. I don't know why we're doing it, but the boss asked us to go move all of the frozen goods to the dry goods section and all of the dry goods to the frozen goods section, and we're going to be here all night. We might as well have a good time while we're doing it, and we might as well do it properly so that he's happy in the morning. And you know what happens? Suddenly you will be the leader among your peers with no one assigning you that. If you display a good attitude, do your job well, and own the outcome. So that's one piece of it. The next thing that came up to me is, it is your job. How many times have you walked down the street and said, and there's a piece of paper on the ground, or the door is open, or the light switch is on, or the toilet is clogged? Well, that's not my job. It is your job. Take a look at it. Own the circumstances, own your environment. Look around you. Say to yourself, hey, I'm here right now. Why am I here right now? I don't know. But maybe it's to flush the toilet so the next guy doesn't have to see it when I come in. Maybe it is to turn off the light so that we can save electricity, so that we have more money for the ice cream social once a month, or whatever it happens to be. Make sure that you understand that it is your job. There's no job that's going to be beneath you. If you are a really good leader, you are going to be willing to do every job that you ask your subordinate to do. And to look at something and say, well, that's not my job. If it needs to get done, it's your job. You may not be the person who physically has to do it. Maybe you are the company commander of a company of soldiers, but you have the manpower to get the job done. And don't wait for your boss to say get it done. You know what it's called when you get things done before people ask you to get them done? It's called initiative, it's called being proactive, it's called leadership. Doing the things that need to be done before you're asked to do them. Figuring out the fact that it is your job, even if no one assigned it to you. Look around, and if you see something that needs to be done, do it. Be prepared. Next thing on the list, be prepared. Anybody in here Boy Scouts? A few folks ever? That's the motto, right? Be prepared. What does that mean? Does that mean I carry a backpack full of everything when I move back and forth between places? I've got a compass, and I've got a watch, and I've got a pocket knife, and I've got a flamethrower, and I've got everything I can. No, that's not really what it means. It's about mental preparation. Look more than 12 minutes into the future. Look at tomorrow. Look at next week. Understand, and you guys learn this with homework. Homework? Is homework son? Yeah, sometimes. But one of the things homework teaches you to do, especially projects, is it teaches you how to look into the future and set goals and milestones so that when you get to the point of your presentation, you're not the one standing up there wondering what you're going to say when the professor says, hey, it's your turn, get your team up there. But it also means that if tomorrow morning there's going to be a working party and we're going to go out and we're going to field day the parade field out there, that you have contacted in advance the people you need to get the tools. As a leader, it's your job to make sure that your subordinates have the tools they need to succeed. That's the way I always looked at my job when I was put in the leadership position, is if the mission failed, if whatever I was assigned failed, what could I have done differently to ensure the success next time? That's why we plan, that's why we prepare, that's why we look into the future. You can't just walk through life waiting for things to hit you in the face and think that you'll be a successful leader. Successful leaders look an appropriate distance for their level out into the future. If you're a platoon leader, probably looking as far as the end of the month is enough. If you're a company commander, probably looking to the end of the quarter is enough. If you're a battalion commander, you're probably looking all the way to the next deployment, so 18 to 24 months. But you need to look into the future, you need to identify requirements, and then make the material, the training, the time, and time is a tool available for your subordinates to succeed. So being prepared as you head out there and making sure that the resources are available for your team to succeed is a key leadership trait. Now, is my, oh, it's almost here. I thought it would be here fairly soon. I'm going to wait 30 seconds for this mystery to finish its transit. Okay. Very interested in it. What did I pass around? I would like some answers from people. Yes, sir. A rusty nail. Anybody have any other ideas? Yes, sir.
This gentleman thinks it's a cat.
Okay, it could be tetanus. I hope it's not, because I've touched it and all of you have touched it. But you're right, it could be carrying a tetanus virus. Okay, that's a good guess, but that's not in fact true. I was never stationed on a wooden ship. But I am that old. No, but it is a rusty. Yes, sir.
Rusty nail probably had a purpose at one point.
It did have a purpose at some point. One more. I'll take one more from the front row. It has been used. What I'm holding in my hand is a flat tire. I picked this up walking down the street with my wife the other day. And we're walking down the street and I bent over and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I gotta pick this nail up." How many of you guys have driver's license? How many of you guys have changed a flat tire? Couple. A flat tire can be a threat to somebody's life, right? You have a blowout on the highway, you can cause an accident, next thing you know, there's a big problem. This is tiny. This isn't very big, but even if it's just a flat tire, you just save somebody $150 by picking it up off the road and putting it in. Why do I say that? Because you are somebody. Okay, and when you look around and you go, well, somebody ought to pick that up. Somebody ought to fix that. Somebody ought to do that. Anytime you put the word somebody out there, how do you put yourself in that sentence? In this case, it was pretty easy for me to bend over and pick up a nail. But it's not always going to be easy for me to do everything. But when I say, gee, somebody ought to fix the pothole in my road. There's a big pothole forming in front of my house. I can't fix that. But I can contact the township and I can say, hey, there's a pothole, it's going to be dangerous if you don't come out here and fix it pretty soon. So whenever you have the opportunity to say somebody ought to do that, try to figure out how you can be somebody. Because every one of you wants to think you're important, right? Well, I've just appointed you all somebody. For the rest of your life, remember that you are somebody. And then back to the original question. Now let's talk about this. With a couple of those little pointers out there, a couple of those little nuggets that maybe you can carry forward with you. Why are you here? Anybody ever been in trouble? I have. I'm going to be right up front. I have. A lot. With my wife, with my boss, with my leading chief petty officer, with my subordinates, you name it, I've been in trouble with just about everybody I've run across. Almost always, it was my fault. Ultimately. Every now and then you might get in trouble where you really did just walk into the wrong place at the wrong time. But then you have to look at the here part. How did I end up in the wrong place in the first place? So, keeping in mind that situation, what's most people's normal reaction when they end up in a problem?
I didn't do it.
Okay, I didn't do it. Good. What else?
How can I get out of trouble with the lease amount of punishment?
Yeah, how can I get out of it as easily as possible? What else? Yes, sir.
Somebody else's fault.
It's somebody else's fault, right? We all want to blame each other or someone else because we can't possibly have been responsible for our own situation, right? It can't be my fault that I got caught coming out of a bar with somebody else's wife on a Friday night. You know, that didn't happen. I would be dead. I would be dead if that happened to me. So we wouldn't be having this conversation. But that's the kind of thing, and you will see that in the media all the time. If you watch celebrity news, oh, well, it wasn't my fault I was on the beach with somebody else's girlfriend. It was the photographer's fault for taking the picture. It was the beach's fault for being there. It was her fault for having on a too small bathing suit. Whatever. It's your fault. Get over the fact that it's your fault. Own it. Own the mistake And then what? What's next? Okay, first off, you have to fix the current mistake. Sometimes the mistake is not fixable where, if you drive your car into a telephone pole, you probably can't fix the car. But you can at least own that and say, hey, that was my fault. And then what? After you fix the mistake, then what? Learn from it, which also means deal with the consequences. Very good. Accept the consequences without excuses, but also, if you're going to learn from it, figure out how to not have it happen again. I mean, so if you've done something and it's stupid and it's caused you discomfort, financial distress, or some other problem, figure out how to get yourself away from the situation that causes that. If you find yourself hanging out in the bad part of town all the time, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually you're going to get sucked into trouble whether you like it or not. So maybe you need to address the here in your life. Why am I here? Put yourself someplace else. Go hang out with different friends. Or move your friends to a better environment. You don't have to ditch your friends, but if they want to hang out in places that are not going to be appropriate for you, and as you all, there was one person who was never going to work for anybody, but if you want to be a leader, you certainly don't want to have your life on the front pages of the National Enquirer with an awful lot of bad press and PR, because unless you're a Hollywood movie star, you can't survive those things in real life. But the you is really important. And this is where it goes back for me all the way back to that Westminster Confession thing. Why am I here? Why did God put you where he put you right now? You guys are in a really good academic institution here. You're learning leadership. You have advanced courses available. You have got all kinds of sports and social and service opportunities available. So you have to look at that. Why are you here? There were a whole lot of people that could be here, but for some reason or another, you ended up here. So there's some special reason why you're in the circumstance you're in right now. There might be some time where you find yourself in one of those positions where you wish you were the leader, and you're not the leader. Why are you put in that situation right now, especially if you know how to do the job better than your boss? And yes, that does happen. You are going to find yourself frequently in a position where you have a boss who is in charge of a whole lot of things and trying to tell you what to do, but your little piece of it, you do know how to do your job better than your boss. So why are you there? To do your job as well as you could. Identify that reason. Look around and go, I'm not really happy where I am. I'm not really happy with this boss, but I am here, and it's me, so what can I contribute? So look at that from a perspective of, it's me, and I'm here, and I'm special, so what can I contribute in an appropriate way for the success of the team, for my own success, or how can I get myself out of it if you've gotten yourself into a place where you shouldn't have been in the first place? But make sure you focus on the fact that it's you. We're not talking big picture. When you're in a leadership position, you have to figure out what your role is in the institution that you're assigned to. And then why? Why do people end up in places? Any ideas? But places in a physical sense, places in a time sense. Why am I in the 21st century? I don't know. But that's kind of the metaphysical part of it. But not only just why are you here physically, but why? What's the role? What put me here in this time? Somebody made a decision to go someplace, but maybe there's a purpose that you don't know about. Has anyone, and you guys are kind of young, but has anyone ever heard from someone in your past where they just came back and they said, hey, I'm glad you were there, and you didn't even know you had an impact in your life, Yeah, some of the old guys like me, we have heard from our old shipmates and from our old platoon mates where years later you'll get an email from somebody and they'll say, Mr. Apgar, remember back on, you don't even remember what they're talking about. And they will send you this note about how you made a comment, you said a cheerful word to them, you took them a cup of water because they were out working and sweating to death, and you just did something kind. You just said something that was supportive. You fixed a typographical error in their military evaluation, and they ended up getting promoted because of that military evaluation. So you may never know the purpose for where you are, but you've got to be confident in your mind that there is a purpose for you being there. Sometimes that purpose might just be for you to get a break. Maybe you have been working really hard and you get assigned to teach at the Army War College. And that happened to me. I had spent years and years on sea duty, and I would go home and I'd tell my wife, I said, I kind of feel guilty getting a paycheck. And she goes, you have worked hard enough, and this is your time to rest and recover from 2 years of being the XO on a sea tour chasing pirates in the Gulf of Aden. Okay, that's a pretty hard job. It's a 20-hour-a-day job every day of the year. So you might have something to learn. Maybe you're in the position you're in because you're being prepared for a better position, a more challenging position. Usually better and more challenging go hand in hand. So when you get promoted, your life is not going to get easier, your life is going to get harder. You may get more authority, you may get more respect, but a lot more is going to be expected of you. So you might be there to learn something. You might be there to teach something to somebody else. You're going to always have people joining the organization that know less than you. And even if they don't work from you, they're going to be your shipmates. They're going to be your platoon mates. They're going to be the people in your office building or in your retail store who are newly hired and can't even figure out how to clock in and out every day. It's not as easy as when I started working at Ponderosa down in Carlisle in 1981. You physically had a time card and you stuck it in a machine. Now you have to know how to use a computer just to clock in and work in most places. So maybe you're there to teach somebody something. Maybe you're there to learn something. Maybe you're there to help somebody that you don't know to help. But that why is really important. That why is the reason you have to keep your head about you and not get upset, not cop an attitude about this job sucks. Yes, there are jobs that suck in that sense of, if I had to dig a ditch every day of my life, I'm not physically built for it because I have not done that. Somebody who started out at 16 years old digging a ditch probably has a back like a mule and biceps like Popeye. But for me, if I had to switch from doing what I'm doing right now to digging ditches, I would probably be dead in 3 weeks. But if it happened, and then keep in mind, why am I there? Well, maybe I was dishonest in my job and now I can't get a job of trust anywhere. So that goes back to owning your own mistakes, right? Okay, if I embezzled money from my company and I end up, the only job I can get is digging ditches for PennDOT. Well, okay, I better keep in mind that I'm not digging ditches for PennDOT because anybody did anything bad to me. Either it's a choice I made or it's the only option available based on a choice I made. And by the way, if you end up digging ditches for PennDOT, that's a good job. That's not meant to be disrespectful to the guys working for PennDOT. But you've got to look at why. What did you do that contributed to where you are? Or what could you have to take away from it? Or what could you do for somebody else? So I kind of started to use it in your hands so everybody can see that. But why are you here really became the key to me to figuring out your role in an organization. And if you're going to be a leader, even if you're not in charge, you've got to be able to identify the role you have in the organization and then find out ways to make a difference in your people's lives, in your lives, and a bigger difference in the world, making the world a safer place for rubber tires. I'm going to hold up right there and see if you guys have any questions at this point. I know that if it's about my career, if it's about things I've done. So, open the floor. Somebody's got to have something that they thought they'd like to add. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about your transition from enlisted to commissioned? Because often that's very challenging, given a previous experience and previous shipmates and then in a different role.
That's actually an excellent question. And that will not only affect that, but every time you have a promotion, that same transition happens. I was enlisted for about 2 years as an electrician. And I was an E4 when I applied and got accepted to an ROTC scholarship for Penn State. And that was very difficult for me to break away from the mindset of us versus them. And it actually didn't succeed until 4 years later, and I was on my first ship. And you guys are probably more familiar with Army rank structure, but the E7 in my division, which is called a chief in the Navy, finally one day took me aside and said, "Sir, you're they. You can't come down here and say they want you to do this, they want us to do that." The chief took a hold of me and said, "Sir, you are they. Own it." And he said, "Get over it. Don't come down here and say they want us to chip paint, they want us to do that." When you're enlisted, you are primarily in the Navy, you're part of the workforce. And in the Army, you're the soldiers. You're the guys that are out there doing the work. And officers are working too, but it's a different kind of work. So when you get commissioned and you leave that enlisted rank behind, it's good to hold on to in your mind the experience of being an enlisted person, but you then have to also transition over to the leadership role where you own the decisions you used to dislike. That decision to go clean the bilge or go clean out the scullery and scrub the dishes. And what's valuable about the previous experience is the ability to connect, to walk down to the galley and talk to the guy who's scrubbing the dishes and say, "Hey, how's it going today?" And the ability and the willingness to just stay down there and help out with them and talk to them. But when you transition from one level of leadership or followership to the next, you do have to kind of cut some of the ties. You can't be buddy-buddy with everybody that you used to work with and still tell them, put on that firefighting suit and go into that space that's on fire and risk your life. Because you will then have an emotional tie-in if you don't make the jump to the next level of leadership. And in the military, that's very important because every person in a position of leadership is at some point going to have an opportunity to make a decision that could affect the lives of the people around them. Whether it means we're going to ban machine guns and go into battle, or whether it means I just had a sailor fall over the side of the ship and I have to put my search and rescue swimmer in the water to rescue that person and risk his life because it's choppy seas in the North Atlantic. That's a complicated decision. So if you don't make the transition of making the cut from one level of leadership to the next level of leadership, you end up compromising not only yourself but the mission, because you have to be able to stay objective. And my son is actually right now in the process of trying to qualify to enlist as a Navy diver and also apply for an ROTC scholarship. So I don't know which way he's going to end up going. We'll find out. Whichever comes through first is probably what he'll end up doing. He's anxious to get started. He's also a senior and has 31 days of school left until graduation. Not that he's counting either. Other thoughts, other questions from folks? Yes, sir.
Where in the world,
It's okay.
where in the world and what threats is the Navy going to be countering in the coming years?
Okay, excellent question. The biggest, there's not really for the Navy, and I've been out for 2 years now, but my perspective is a World War II style fleet battle is not anything that's on the near horizon. And I'm a military historian, and I'm taught at the War College. I don't see us ever, in the near term, getting back into huge fleets of ships fighting at each other. The challenges for the Navy is maritime security. What does that mean? It means counter-piracy. It means making sure that smuggling operations, and in particular is human smuggling, human trafficking is a huge problem. There are probably 1.5 million people in the world right now that are living in some sort of slavery through human trafficking. Whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Asia, whether it's, as we found out 2 years ago in, I think it was Cincinnati, where there were 3 women chained in a guy's basement for 6 years. The challenges that we have as a Navy now, mission-wise, are to be kind of a global police force of the ocean, to keep things clean, but also to support ground forces and to support the mission that the President assigned. So in the Gulf War in the early 90s, we had a very active role against Iraq. In Afghanistan, we had an enormously active role because we actually the Navy launched the first attacks into Afghanistan the ship I was on, USS Baton, launched with the first wave of Marines. So we were there in 2001, and we launched Marines to support ground forces. Because there's not really a global naval threat, and China is a threat, and Russia is a threat, but not in the sense that Japan was in World War II. We are mostly finding ways to support the mission. The important thing that the Navy can do for us is provide us global access. That when you go out there on a U.S. Navy ship, it's a sovereign piece of U.S. territory, and I can do anything I want as long as I'm 12 miles off the coast. The Air Force has to fly all the way from Lackland Air Force Base, or I forget the place in Louisiana, where at Barksdale, where they launched the B-52s to bomb Iraq, and they spent 12 hours in the air. I can put an aircraft carrier 12 miles off the coast of Iraq, and I can do anything I want with it. So mostly our challenge is supporting the national strategy. The threats to the Navy, has anyone ever heard of USS Cole?
Yes, sir.
A no-kidding rowboat with a little trolling motor on the back of it slammed into the side of a state-of-the-art $1 billion warship and killed a whole bunch of shipmates and almost sank that ship in Aden Harbor. Now, has anyone here ever been to Yemen? It's probably the worst place I've ever been on the face of the earth. I can understand why there's a lot of problems there. We pulled into Yemen to refuel about 18 months before the coal got hit. What we did was we established a pattern, and about every 6 weeks a U.S. warship went into Aden Harbor, and actually they tried to hit a ship about 3 months earlier but missed because they had a malfunction in the boat ahead of time. The second mission got through and the coal got hit. And so that type of attack physically is the most challenging threat for the Navy, along with things like a low, slow-flying aircraft. Where did anybody hear last week what happened at the Capitol building last week? Somebody had yeah.
There was a postal man that looked like a...
Yeah, some dude went postal, literally. A postal worker got into an ultralight helicopter. I don't know how far he flew. He actually launched from Pennsylvania, I think is what I heard. He was from Florida. He came up here. He flew his helicopter all the way to the lawn of the U.S. Capitol and sat down. Now, how in the world did he do that? Why didn't he get shot down? I mean, there's technical challenges to that problem. But also, if you're the guy behind the gun, are you really going to be willing to pull the trigger when you don't know what's... Now, nothing bad happened. And so everybody goes, oh, security failed. Well, I don't know. Security didn't fail. Nothing bad happened. But if he had slammed into the building, boy, there'd have been a lot of problems. But in the interim, if someone had shot that ultralight helicopter down in between, would we be facing a huge outcry about injustice and why did you do that, and it's not a police state. So that's the challenge of a small aircraft is you have to, it's clear to me if a Iranian, Russian-built aircraft is screaming at my ship at Mach 1.5, shoot it down. That's a pretty easy decision. When it is a Cessna going 120 knots, doing circles out there about 10 miles from my ship, what am I going to do? That's a tough challenge. And you have to make a decision, and then you have to own that decision, and that's the hardest part. But you've got to make a decision about how you're going to defend your ship. And I've been there, and I've never shot any of them down, and they all worked out okay. So I guess it was the right decision to make. But you find yourself in that. So did that answer your question at all? Approach it some?
Yes, but I mean, you didn't tell me where in the world.
Oh, where? Okay, where are the biggest threats? Good, that's why I came back to ask you. It's not offensive at all to clarify. The Middle East, as you know, if you're watching the news, the Middle East is a problem. Yemen just evolved into civil war and chaos. There are several countries in Africa, around the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa is not where Cape Town is. The Horn of Africa is actually the part up by the Arabian Peninsula, where Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, where those countries are. There's a lot of problem there, a lot of unrest. Our own, in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, Central America is an extremely unstable place. I don't know that that's going to become a Navy problem so much, except in the event of migrants. But that largely will fall on the Coast Guard, who owns that piece of Homeland Security. And then the big animal in the house is the China-Taiwan, North Korea situation. So those would be the places I would watch for significant naval activity. Another question, anybody else? Yes, sir.
So what is it like being on a ship for
It's awesome. That's what it's like for me, but it's not like that for everybody. I miss it. But it is a very routine thing. If you deploy on a ship, it's typically 6 or 7 months, and you will go out to sea, and about every 6 weeks, you'll do a port visit someplace. In between that, you'll have a logistics supply ship come out to you and bring you food and mail and fuel for the ship, which will have a very set routine. Every morning, reveille will go down at 6 o'clock. You'll eat breakfast until 7:15. You'll eat lunch from 11:30 to 1300. You'll eat dinner from 1700 to 1830. You'll have mid-rats. If you have watch all night, and because on a ship, people stay up all night long, not because they're partying, but because they have to work, because someone has to operate the ship around the clock throughout the day. So if you're having watch from midnight to 4 in the morning, you'll be able to get a snack in between. There is a laundry department on the ship. There is a barber shop on the ship. There is a ship store where you can go buy candy bars and shoe polish and soap and personal items. We have a cable TV system on the ship where you can watch TV in the 12 minutes that you don't work or have watch during the day. There's fitness equipment on the ship, but mostly you'll work. And you'll work probably 8 to 10 hours a day and stand watch for 4 hours a day. So most people, that 6 months goes very quickly. It seems like it's a long time when you start. It's longer for your family. When you leave your spouses at home, it's longer for them than it is for you. Because you will just be busy the whole time you're out there. And then you'll pull into port and you'll have 3 days of crazy recreation where you will not get drunk and you will not get in trouble and you will not get arrested, right? Those are the long years today. But you will go out and you'll get to see things like the castle where the movie El Cid was filmed, or the ruins on the island of Rhodes, or the pyramids in Egypt. And you'll get to eat food in Barcelona, Spain, and in Greece, and in Morocco, and in Congo. You will go to interesting places in the Navy. And then after 3 days, you'll get back on the ship and you'll go back out for 6 weeks and do it all over. But what are you doing while you're out at sea? A lot of times you're doing training with other navies, where you're doing exercises with them about how to do boardings or border enforcement or customs enforcement. We do counter-drug operations where we go out and surveil in the Caribbean and try to find the people who are running drugs across the Caribbean. You will do fire drills over and over and over. The most dangerous thing at sea is a fire, because there's nowhere. If you're in your house and your house burns down, you run outside. If you're in the middle of the ocean and your ship burns down, guess what? There's no outside. You're there. So you've got to be able to put out fires. You've got to be able to deal with emergencies. So you'll run a lot of training drills. You'll run a lot of combat drills. Most of the ships that I was on, every ship that I was on had a missile launcher of some kind. So we would do drills about air raids, and we would have the whole ship go to what's called general quarters. And we'd go through that, and you would man up, and we would track a pretend missile, and we would do that, and then we'd miss, and the missile would hit, and we'd pretend we had a fire and a hole in the ship. But all of that is to train us for the real thing that happens. And then finally at night, you'll have taps, you'll have the evening prayer, and it'll be lights out till reveille, but still about 1:30 your shipmates are going to be on watch all night keeping you safe. That's kind of what it's about, and waiting for something to happen. Mostly in the military, except for the last 10 years or so, we've just been waiting for something to happen. We're kind of a response force. What am I doing on time? I'm almost there. One last question? I had 2 hands up.
I was going to say, can you comment on the British experience in 1982 in the Falklands, and whether that experience, like naval combat, shaped any of the American strategies, tactics, responses, particularly around fire with Coventry, Sheffield, Arden, Antelope?
Yeah, what was interesting for us, the lesson learned out of the Falklands, well, one is it's really bad to have colonies all over the world. It's just hard to support. But no, really, the naval warfare, there were some interesting things that came out of that. The British expended, I think, 65 torpedoes trying to attack a submarine that didn't exist. There was a submarine threat that the Argentinians had, and the British were rightly concerned about a submarine threat, and they expended an enormous amount of resources chasing a submarine that actually wasn't there, because submarine warfare is really, really difficult. And even if there's not a submarine there, if you can convince somebody that there is, they will commit an enormous amount of resources to protecting their aircraft carriers and other units from a submarine attack. And the other piece of it is that aluminum ships burn. And people won't think about this. We, in World War II, started building ships with aluminum superstructures. Now, what that means is the hull, the part that's in the water, was made out of steel, but the part that came up above the main deck and stuck up into the air was made out of aluminum. And you guys have all used sparklers. You've seen sparklers. They're made out of metal, right? How do they burn? Well, they're made out of a metal like magnesium that once you ignite it, it creates its own heat. Enough heat to melt the metal, vaporize the metal, and then burn the metal. Well, the aluminum will do the same thing. And we learned that from watching what happened in the Falklands. And we reaped the benefits, or actually the consequences, in 1987 when Saddam Hussein attacked the USS Stark and put 2 Exocet missiles into the Stark. It's a guided missile frigate with an aluminum superstructure. Neither of those missiles detonated. They hit, and then the jet engines inside of them burned inside the ship and caught the aluminum on fire. And it took hours, about 12 hours, to get that under control. The ship almost sank. They put so much firefighting water in it. So what we learned was the next class of ships that we designed, the Arleigh Burke destroyer, does not have an aluminum superstructure. It's an all-steel ship. It's much heavier. It takes a lot more fuel to operate. But we lost a lot of sailors on the Stark. The British lost a lot of sailors in the ships that they had hit in the Falklands. So we learned a lesson from that. In fact, one of the department heads, which would be the equivalent of a company commander, one of the department heads on the Stark actually came up to Penn State while I was a midshipman and spoke, because he was a Penn State graduate, and talked about how people were burned and disfigured. So we learned some lessons from that, both on a tactical side, especially with the ASW, the submarine warfare, which is just a terribly difficult problem, and also in naval architecture. I think perhaps I've run out of time. Is that true? I'm watching my watch on Cadet Bank here. Am I? Yeah, I think I'm done. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.
Gentlemen, that was an excellent presentation. I want to thank Commander Bruce Apgar for being here, sharing his insights.
I forgot. The secret to success. Show up on time and do what you're told. If you do those 2 things, you will go far in your life. Show up on time and do what you're told.
One thing I learned is being at Carson long is a bit like being at a ship at sea. Breakfast up at 6, breakfast at 7, lunch at 11:30, dinner at 1700. So take these lessons to heart. The future's yours. Own it. Battalion Commander, take over.